welcome everyone tonight. Thank everyone for coming. As you all know, we have a new book that we've written, myself with Denis Hambucken and the late John Warner, and it's called The Prairie Flyers of Central Illinois. It is on the history of aviation in America's Heartland, including this part of the Heartland. We tried to just squeeze a little bit of everything into this book. We have people who flew airplanes, people who dreamed of flying airplanes, people who took tickets, people who worked on airplanes, flew hot air balloons, you name it, everyone is in there. Tonight we're really pleased to have Nelson Thorp with us, and of course anyone from this part of the is familiar with the Thorp name. I think it is synonymous in this part of the country for many things, including aviation. And he's going to talk about his dad, Ernest Thorp, who of course was a well-known B-17 pilot. And I know you all came to hear Nelson and not me talk, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Nelson. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate putting something like this together and being forced to look at Dad's diary again. Okay? It's been several years since I read the thing. It's up here. I'm going to be using it tonight. There's only 173 pages. It was the day he left from Decatur train station till the day he was deroached or got out of the Army in Florida in 1945. Most of these people at that time seemed to keep a logbook, seemed to keep a diary. I was able to find the diary of his bombardier and another fellow that he flew with in training. And I'll be darned, they matched up. You know why? They weren't telling big lies the whole time. They matched up. These hours, where it was, these dates, they matched up. So we want to get started on this, but I just want to remind you that I am Ernest's son. Now, for about 15 years in this community, I was Ernest's son. I don't know if anybody knew my first name. It was one of those things that I knew I had to stand straight and I had to do the right thing, and I couldn't screw up because I was Ernest's son. And he had a reputation, a very good one around here. And starting with the seed business and the farming and his lay leadership in the church that he did, I hope I was a good example. I know he was a good example to me, and I hope I lived up to it. And that's where we'll start off from. So he was raised just 2.5 miles straight east of Wapella. And to get things confused already, 2.5 miles east of Wapella, but he had a Clinton address. And I understand the postmasters didn't get along yet. So it was literally an argument between my grandfather and a Clinton postman. And they decided that they're going to split it at our road. One side of the road was Clinton, the other side of the road was Wapella. I don't know if that's true or not. Anybody confirm that? Okay. So he had a Clinton address, but he went to school in Wapella. He was the oldest of 5 with 4 sisters of his dad's second wife, 4 years after his first wife died. And his brother was 13 years older than he was. Now, is that confusing yet? So he was the second family, and my Uncle Carl's mother passed away very soon after the birth of his sister. And my grandfather actually lived at the YMCA here in town for those 4 years. That's a whole other story too, but he came out of that, got married again, and started the second family. And another point that seemed to always hit home was the 1927 tornado. I hope there's no one in here that old that remembers that one. But the fact is, 1927 was a tornado that tore up most of Wapella and tore up what was then Claude W. Thorp and Sons farm. He was in the cattle business. He had a whole lot of cattle. I never did find out how many cattle Dad and Grandpa had on the farm, but Dad was only 6. One of the hired men that he loved dearly literally jumped on top of him and held Dad down during the tornado. It took their barns, it took their silos, messed up their houses, and in the meantime, after the fact, Grandpa actually built a house that came from Sears. It was delivered on the railroad in Wapella. They picked it up on wagons. Item 1 went to item 2. But the fact is, that changed the whole atmosphere around the farm. My dad didn't have to do chores anymore. He kind of remembers that. No cattle, no chores. I'm not sorry. But he's only 6. But then just a few years later, in 1936, my grandfather Claude signed a contract with Funk Brothers Seed Company in Bloomington. And that's part of the whole farm ag history in this whole country. But they ended up being the biggest single seed company in the world for a few years. That was before Pioneer, before DeKalb, before Monsanto, all those guys. And we were connected with them. We were associate growers in 1936. So they got busy in a hurry doing what they needed to do. Grandfather was a good innovator. He had one of the first big all-trailer tractors and those kind of things. But after that contract, of course, Dad was still in high school, graduated in Wapella in 1939. He enrolled in ISNU in Bloomington, so that was still Bloomington Normal University. Normal University was supposed to be a teacher if he went up there. Dad decided he didn't want to be a teacher, so he transferred to U of I in 1941, the fall of 1941. He also began his flying career. He got into this story a little bit, and he was drafted or called to service during his senior year in college, but he was awarded his diploma anyway. And a lot of guys got that. Anybody that was a senior in good standing, the year that they were taken into service, got their diploma. So that's how Dad got his bachelor's degree in agriculture. He was called to active duty, and it was reported in the paper that way, that he knew from the paper that he got his diploma. In 1941, things started to change drastically. Everybody in this room knows what was happening in Europe at the time. December 7th, you know what happened that day? We were at war. March 8th, 1941, Dad became a student pilot under the program subsidized by the federal government to try to train pilots. So he got his license, his student permit, March 8th. He was a private pilot May 25th. Did any of us get her that quick? How many in here are pilots, or have been, or have been? Okay. I won't say how long it gets your private, right? I had 90 hours and it took too long, okay? But the fact is that he got it quickly. He had 80 hours of flying time before he was inducted into the Army Air Corps. In the 69 years of active flying, military and civilian, his 30 months on active duty during World War II, but that was a defining part of his life until he died. Every day he would talk about that. You can't forget it. And any of you in this room that have been in combat, whether you're Vietnam, Korea, World War II, or whatever, you're not going to forget it. Even if you didn't write it down in 173 pages. So that's what I found out. Dad said write it down, I didn't. I can still remember. But the fact is that 10 million people served during World War II, and Dad was one of them. He was different when he came home. He was able to talk about it though. And he talked to hundreds of kids in the classrooms around this community at Clinton, Wapella, Waynesville, Farmer City, DeLand, just about every place seemed to call Dad once in a while. We'd go pack up his stuff and he'd talk about World War II. And I think that's what kept his head on straight. When I was a teenager, we found out there was this thing called PTSD. Dad wouldn't talk about it. Mom wanted me to watch my dad. I'm 15. Why am I supposed to watch my dad? He's supposed to watch me. No, that was the problem. He wouldn't talk about it, but he got through it. So I'm going to go through this diary basically, and not page for page. We're not going to be here for 173 hours.
But do you mind telling people who these
So these people,
Yep.
this is Dad's family. This is Claude and Louise, his mother, and his 4 sisters. Okay? They've now all passed away. Ruth, what's up here in the corner, just passed away 2 weeks ago. I think. Yeah. So this is the second family. Okay? So I want to read this sheet that came out when I'll put it this way. The family knew about the diary. We didn't know where Dad was keeping it. You know what? An advocate for World War II veterans had come out and talked to Dad and put some of this stuff together, and so I don't forget it. He's got 5 hours on tape at the Lincoln Library in Springfield. 5 hours on tape. This book is also in the archives in Washington, D.C. But the fact is, a fellow from Benton, Arkansas, came up here and interviewed Dad and asked for permission to take his diary. And I would have probably said, why are you keeping this guy in your diary? But here it is. He says, I can't thank you enough, Mr. Thorp, the former Prairie from Scholar Luke 3, a man who gave so much to so many, a man who gave us free soil we walk on today. Thank you for sharing your story for future generations. Then the family found out it was in print. It is not printed in a book. It's in 8.5 by 11 typed pages. After that, my sister got a hold of it, Carol, and her husband, and I want to say she typed on this for a year.
Yep.
She retyped it. She added all his notes from prison camp, which are here. You can look at them. We printed them and copied them. You can't hardly read them. I'll tell you, he shouldn't have even got out of prison camp with this. There are diagrams in here of the whole Solid Luke 3. He's got distances between the buildings. Okay, that was probably a no-no. So they put this together. The brother read it, okay? And you get goosebumps all the time. You know this is your dad doing this stuff, right? So this is his stretch in the service. So as we go through this, I just want to try to emphasize a few things. As we go through some of these slides, this was his primary training in Chickasaw, Oklahoma. That's Dad in the back seat. Okay? Let's go to the next one. He went to advanced training. Now, can you see the difference between the first one we showed and this one? Did Dad age in 6 months? All of you have been under intense training. You know what happens? Okay. He looks a little older than that now, or just 6, 8 months later. So primary training, he found out that he wasn't too bad at it. He could stand the drills and he could run, so he could keep up with people. The other thing that was surprising me, he didn't know Morse code well enough. That was the only way you communicated in an airplane then, was Morse code. Very little voice, okay? UHF was just coming on then, so you just had Morse code. He's having a hard time with that. He didn't mind the drills, and he didn't mind the senior class bugging him all the time. It sounds like OCS when I was in that. The senior class would always come up with the juniors, and we'd have to do push-ups for them. I didn't like that a bit. When I became a senior, oh, that was fun. Okay, anyway. And with flight pay at the time, he was getting paid $75 a month. Okay, I can remember as a private being paid $90. Does that sound right? Yeah, about $90 a month. That was a few years later. Okay, the first part of May in '43, he became his pre-flight, went through the OCS type of period, became an officer, primary in Chickasaw, and then basic training for him started on September 2nd, '43. And in this training cycle, Dad saw his first accident with an airplane, and one of the cadets was killed. 9 weeks later, another one was killed. The airplane came apart, the instructor got out, the student didn't. As he advanced through this thing, he went to advanced training in Alice, Oklahoma. Have we got a picture of that one? We don't. There's, anybody remember the movie that was, not movie, it was a TV series in the 60s, am I right? Sky King? Yeah. Okay, what was he flying? You guys know.
Bomber.
They called it a bamboo bomber. It was an 1817. It was a Cessna trainer, twin engine. Boy, it was a heck of an airplane then. We've got his logbooks here, and he's got like 75 hours in one of those. Okay? But that's what he was flying. This picture has him on leave in my grandfather's office at the company, okay? He reported to Salt Lake City the last day of his leave. He had a lot of classes, but no flying. On February 24th in Sioux City, Iowa, he was now flying B-17s in training. And he witnessed 2 B-17s collide on the runway, both of them burning, killing 5 people. He was a crew right behind him. They said we couldn't shut the engines off fast enough. We all bailed out, basically jumped out of the airplane, tried to get guys out of the burning ones. And he said that was more traumatic than he'd seen so far. I mean, he was personally there when that happened. So things weren't going to get any better, and you know that. On May 14th, Dad arrived in Kinley, Nebraska, where he was assigned a brand new B-17 that just came off the factory floor. He was assigned a crew, and they trained to make sure from February to March 14th, okay? And they were going to take these B-17s to Europe. They had to be flown over there somehow, and they didn't have enough ferry pilots yet, and the WASPs were flying B-17s in. There was only 2 or 3 women crews at the time that could fly those from the factories even to the Air Force bases, or Army Air Corps bases. There's one enough pilots. So his crew got together, you know, everybody shakes hands. We're going to fly 4,000 miles tomorrow. So they took off. 53 new B-17s took off, spaced 3 minutes apart. They did it in 3 legs, 9.05 hours to Manchester, New Jersey. Manchester. New Jersey.
No, you got NH there.
Lancaster. No, it's Manchester. Okay. Thanks, sis. 5.3 hours to Grander Field in Newfoundland. They stayed, checked out the airplane again, filled it up with fuel, and they were going to fly 11 hours over the water to England. They took off at night. They honestly didn't want to see the water. So they agreed. So all 53 airplanes, again, took off at 3-minute intervals, flying to England. This is where I got the book out for the bombardier, and they were having trouble with the celestial, the stargazing that they had to do. Now, this B-17 doesn't have it, but there is a globe right up here at the top of it. If you see the G models at all, that was actually there for navigation. The pilots, navigator, and bombardier were all taught how to do that. And so they were supposed to do that all the way across that water so they could hit that island. But they didn't. It was all froze over. They had to take off in the snow. They flew through the snow. How to keep those radial engines running and not get carburetor ice, I don't know. But they got them up through the storm, and they flew at 15,000 feet for 6-7 hours, let down for 4 more hours. They landed with about 100 gallons of gas left. And Dad says in his notes, well, they said it would work. So anyway, they got those brand new B-17s over to England. They landed there, and they were instantly, so to speak, taken away from them. The crews were all separated, and then he ended up, and I think we got one of the cockpit so we can see this. Now, I want you pilots to look at this right now. Is this a old B-17 or a new B-17? See what's in the middle? That's a Garmin GPS. So the fact is that he flew a G model over, and of course it didn't have that, but all this instrumentation here was the same. The co-pilot had more to do than the pilot. The co-pilot was to maintain the oil pressure, manifold pressure, and RPMs on all 4 engines. He was supposed to make sure that every one of them didn't overheat. He was to check and make sure that the cowl flaps are open or they were closed. Those cowl flaps on that model, as you can see, they were open. In the ice and stuff, they would close them to get more heat in the engine, etc., etc. 1,200 horsepower apiece. They would burn between 60 and 100 gallon an hour. When they were loaded, they would burn almost 100 gallon an hour with their bomb load. They could haul 6,000 pounds of bombs and another 6,000 pounds of ammunition. Each one of those 50 caliber machine guns, there's 13 of them, The waist guns had 600 rounds apiece. How many rounds did you guys carry on the Buick?
Thousands.
1,000. So each waist gun had 600 on a B-17. The nose had 600 for 4 guns. They had the one, the chins and the sides, but he'd clip it to whatever he was shooting. Okay, so they had a lot of rounds in there. There was also a story about another B-17 pilot in the book, in this book, that said they came home on one mission on 3 engines, couldn't figure out why one engine wasn't running right. They found out a 50 caliber cartridge had come off of one of the guns and jammed in the controls of the prop on their engine. That's what stopped it. So those rounds are flying around all over the place, and you get 100 airplanes flying together. That's 1,300 guns, right? Have I got my math right? And half of those are firing. How many and where are those cartridges going? Now, how many of you seen the movies about them standing in the cartridges? And we had a minigun on one of our fire bases one time. 4 of those fired at one time. Oh yeah, cut down a tree. So the fact is, there's a lot of cartridges flying and a lot of weight there. But they had it, okay? So they could haul a lot. But they were vulnerable, or less vulnerable than a B-24. Anybody talking about that? I know we talked about the B-24 pilots. The B-24 was harder to fly and wouldn't take as much damage, but it would also haul more ammo and more bombs. The B-17, they made 12,000 of them. B-24s made 15,000 of them. There's 5 of them left in the world now, B-17s, that are flyable. Okay, so he flew over there for 23 and a half hours. They landed. I got it in my pocket here someplace. Maybe I can point it out better, but I'll get it. He was right in this area. Maybe you can see it. 452nd Bomb Group. He was right here. Okay? The 100th that's mentioned in the book, and I'll mention that in a minute, right here. It's in Masters of the Air movie. It was only 5 miles away. Thorp Abbott Field. And we can claim that we can't prove it yet. That's relatives. They spelled an E. But it was the town of Abbott, and the farm was owned by a Thorp. Okay, that's what's in the book. That's what's in the movie. The 10-part series. Down here, okay, 385th was B-24s. Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart made 35 missions in a B-24 at the same time Dad was flying. So this is where they flew from. It would take them 3 to 4 hours to form up. There would be 100 airplanes there, 20 from each one of these bases. And you see 20 planes taking off here, big ones, circling, climbing, Why did they have that designator on the tail? Okay, Dad's was square H. Thorp Abbott Field was a triangle A. So they could tell who they were flying with. They couldn't talk. It would sometimes take 4 hours of flying just to get in formation before they left the coast of England. Then the bomb run, then the run home. Okay? So this was quite a story starting for Dad. As we go through this, I just want to mention one other thing. Compared to a 4,000-mile trip, 23 hours, and then a book written by his bombardier. I talked about the ice over everything, and he couldn't even navigate. So the pilot, which was named Cotton and Dad Thorp, he, in his book, named Cotton and Thorp must have known what they're doing because we got here. We trust those 2 guys. We're going to make sure we fly with them, no matter what. Those 2 have got to be up front. As it turned out, Dad was a rotator. He was in every plane that they flew on, I think. Every mission he was assigned to somebody else. And that was part of the trouble. They came out here and basically he got there, started flying May 15th. He was shot down August 4th. Okay, he wasn't with the same crew. The crew that he flew over with ended up in Sweden. On their 4th mission over Germany, they got beat up real bad. Dad knew which plane they were in. And so he was checking out another pilot in above them, saw him hit, they left the formation, didn't see him again. So he reported him missing, found out there in Switzerland. They stayed there for 9 months. What did I say? Sweden. They were there for 9 months. Then they came home. Yeah, wasn't too bad at all. Dick Quinton had to go over in a troop ship, and he came over in a C-46. Okay, everybody know what that is? Not a 47, a 46, that ugly nose one, right? Dad flew over and then came back on a troop ship. So if that means anything, but Dick Quinton's the one that's up by Hayworth. And he flew out of the same place just months later. He came there, he ended up there in February of 45. And Dad had been a prisoner of war already for about 6 months. So June 6th comes around. It's D-Day. So we're just going to go through some of these. So there's one of his gunners. And seemingly, this guy was one of them that would stay with him no matter what. I don't care what my orders are, I'm fine with you. Okay? That's the high altitude gear. If any of you are out at the museum, Mr. Warner, John Warner, got a hold of that. I don't know where he found it, or what he had to pay for it. Okay. But that's what they wore. He had all this stuff on, and the parachute was supposed to be on the outside. Well, if you read his diary, he had his coat over it when he parachuted. So that was another problem. Go ahead. I don't think you can see that at all. Dad's right there in the middle, basically the taller of the bunch. So he's there. There's 10 of them in that one. I think the next one, he took this picture, so there's only 9 of them. And I don't know any of this guy's name. Dad tried to keep in contact with as many as he could. Go ahead. The punch foul was the airplane that Dad was shot down in. It was an airplane that they couldn't find on the airstrip at the time. And if we can, I don't know if we can get back to, do we have a picture of Ethan Green? I don't think we do we? We should have brought it. Okay. That was a field on a farmer's field. And I'll just tell you the story, since we don't have it, is the fact that it was owned by the Jeffrey family. The Department of War came to him and said, Jeffries, we got to take your farm. We need it for an airfield. Did you see all those points up there? Every one of those points was somebody's farm. And every one of those points was taken over by the War Department in England. Every one of those farms was, they said, yes, sir, we'll sign the papers. They were taken over for 4 years. At the end of that time, the Jeffries family had to buy it back from the British government. What did the British government give them? 2 big mile-long runways, 14 to 15 buildings, 6 hangars. It's yours, but you got to pay us. The Jeffries wouldn't tell us how much they paid for it. It wasn't too bad. He said we scraped together every penny we had and borrowed money from the bank, and we bought our farm back. And they're still farming it today. The guy that's there now is my age. He's just 2 months older than I am. But they lived there. It showed their house up in one corner. And Mrs. Jeffries would say, those Yanks would come over here and they had to test their guns. It was only 5 o'clock in the morning. Why couldn't they wait till we woke up? They were there. They stayed there on that base, on their farm, while those guys were flying off of it every day. We were able to take a tour when my son was over in London, England, at a job right after he graduated from college. Dad arranged for us to go on a trip. He knew this retired policeman. And he said, I want you to get on this train. Dad arranged all this. And you travel for an hour and 15 minutes, get off and wait on the platform for this guy to come and pick you up. How do we know who it is? Dad forgot to say anything about it. I'm walking on the platform with my son and wife, Linda, and this guy comes up and just walks right up to me and says, you're Ernest Thorp's son, aren't you? And you go on your knees and it's, yep, I am. He took us around all day. They gave us a lunch at their little house, you had to have tea. It was just totally British, totally great. At Thorpe Abbott Field, we crawled over the fence because it was locked. We had to stand in the tower at Thorpe Abbott Field. That's all I had to do that. We went to Green. That was the air base where the Jeffries lived. Mrs. Jeffries had to give us tea again. Very gracious. Knew Dad, showed us his letters. He would write her probably 3 or 4 times a year, and she would keep those letters from Dad on this farm. I couldn't meet with the son at the time because they had cholera in their hogs and there was quarantine. And that's what I regret to this day. And he will comment on politics. I said that. But anyway, that's kind of the story. Dad made connections. I mean, all the way through this, but right there. And still to this day, you know, we got the sons they have conversation. And this is what was really great about what Dad was doing. So, we go through this thing. His first mission was June 18th. He had a 7-hour mission over Durban, Germany. They were supposed to be hitting some oil fields. And he mentioned that here that Dad had moved from crew to crew and would not know of the pilot he was going to fly with until he got in the cockpit. The crew he trained with flew all over England with all their other crews and had requested Dad's crew every time, but were denied most of the time. They trusted Dad as a level-headed pilot, and the policy was changed by the time Dick Quinton got there. When he got there, the crew he trained with in Sioux City, Iowa, was the crew he flew 35 missions with. Every time they went up, it was the same 10. They knew what each one of them were thinking. That's a whole lot better. Okay? But they didn't do that in Vietnam either, did they? They didn't keep us together. Anyway, this is what we did. So I just want to read something here. July 12th, 1944. Okay, if I can find the right one. July 12th. I wasn't supposed to be operational day, but then I was told at 4 a.m. that I was flying. I'm flying this guy named Heartland, but I found out he was from Urbana, Illinois. So I guess I'll go with him. Well, the trip was to Munich, and we soon had our position in the formation. So our effort to be up in the skies was not for naught. I wouldn't cared not to have gone, but here we are. We're number 2 in the low squadron, lead group. The trip to the target wasn't so bad, and coming back I thought we'd never make it home. 9.5 hours with 10 hours of fuel. We'd been to Munich the day before. Over the target, the flak was thick, inaccurate, so I'm happy for that. The one below us got hit pretty hard. 2 ships brought back dead men. Number 1 engine ran away with us. I got it back into control by feathering and unfeathering it. You guys have known used with pitch props. You pull it in, pull it out, pull it in. You could probably get it back together. So he got it back running. They had to do an instrument letdown in the fog over London. Got in at 300 feet. A B-17 with a 130-foot wing. You tip it too far, you got to cut the trees at 300 feet because it's 130 foot long. They were in oxygen for 6 hours. Sweated out the landing, and we made it. Almost stalled on approach. Well, we were pulling around into our hard stand. Another ship came in, lost an engine on final, had to bell it in, couldn't get his gear down, and came sliding right for us. Well, he stopped before he hit us. Sure wrecked a brand new airplane. At that night, he went to the club, and Dad, now he never drank hard liquor. I'll prove that, but he never did. So I went and had a Coke. I sat down with this guy, and he started talking. He said his name was Steve Lane. He's from Clinton, Illinois. Never knew him before. He's a cousin. Now, Dad's name says Shimmy Lane. Anybody know that name? Yes?
Shumley Lane.
Shumley Lane.
Shumley
Okay.
Lane, I think.
It was a cousin of.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It was a cousin of my grandma.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now, how do you do that? How do you do that? So that was just after a mission. You just relax and you find a guy from home. Okay, so we go on to he'd flown 16 more missions, and the title of this was Prisoner of War. And if I'm taking too much time, why, just shut me up, okay? August 4th, 1944. The day began as a real bummer. At least everything seemed to be against us from the very start. I drew Smith. Now, I don't know what that means. I think he's flown with him before. I was due for a pass, and due to the operation screw up, I had to fly. Well, we'll make it an unhappy situation as good as we can. Naturally, it didn't set off too good with me when we all got to the airplane and it was in bad shape. Then I was told I could pick up an airplane in another group, and he had to drive. The airfield was about a mile wide. He had to drive in the dark, in the fog, to get to the next airplane. He hadn't seen it before, and that was the one that was shot down. This was the one he found. The tail was shot up, but they patched it up real quick. Duct tape. And so he says, well, I'll take it. So the co-pilot was the one that picked the airplane, did all the pre-flight on the airplane, and the pilot just gets in and does his thing, right? Does that ever happen to anybody who was second in command? That seems to be the way it went. One of the crew members took 2 escape packages. Well, I'm going to have to pay an extra $50 when I get back. Each person was supposed to take only $50. However, they turned up late on the trip and made no difference anyway. The entire crew seemed very nervous, and when I made the remark to the checker, he said, "Brother, you're in for it today." Everybody had this crazy feeling that it wasn't going to go right. My original crew waist gunner was with me, but he wasn't with me that day. He was the driver of the Jeep that took us out there. So he knew who he was talking to, and he knew when we didn't come home. However, things went normally once we were airborne, got into formation okay, and we seemed like maybe things were calming down. I was on the intercom with the crew and we hit the coast. The bombing run started. The crew began to scream. They were yelling for evasive action. There was flak everywhere. We were briefed that there weren't going to be that much flak today. The pilot said he saw fire, so he screamed, "Prepare to bail out." The crew only heard the last 2 words, not prepare, bail out. They hadn't got to the target yet. I heard the last 2 words, and I don't argue, maybe that's just the way it went. We got rid of my flak suit though, and I was ready to try to take my coat off. Well, then the pilot got nervous. He feathered the wrong engine that was bad. I tried to grab the engine. I took control of the airplane. He was in a panic mode, his first mission. So Dad was flying the airplane, trying to get it one engine unfeathered and get the other engine that he feathered started, so he'd have at least 2. He got the other one started. The other one was too oil. The pressure was too low in the oil. I couldn't get the prop to go in the feather. That means straight forward. So now that one's going and vibrating on the outside of the wing. The other thing, I've got any multi-engine guys in here, I can never remember how they number them. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4 from left to right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think. Okay, if you lose both of them on one side, you're in trouble. If you got one on either side, you're okay. So we got number 1 running again. Number 3 was in trouble. I told him I'm staying in formation. I don't care what you say. Basically, Dad had more time. I'm going to tell you to, shut up and sit down. Well, he didn't. He got up. So he wasn't even at the controls. He was very insistent and asked the navigator to get us a route out of there, get us off the flak. Okay. He said, yes, I can do that. Then he tried calling the fighters on the UHF channel, and he got the wrong channel. So no fighters came up to help us. We were dropping fast. We were losing altitude. Every burst seemed to have our number. And Dad went on for 4 pages. I did all the violent action I could. I darted with 3 engine. I used rudder, elevator, everything. I did everything but a loop with that B-17. But I couldn't keep it up. I kept losing altitude. I kept doing everything I could. I called back to start dumping they dumped their guns. Please dump the guns, take all ammunition, throw it out. Dump the turret on the bottom, that was real heavy. I guess that weighed almost 1,000 pounds. So they dropped it, that would help. He got no response. The rest of the crew had dumped and jumped 20 minutes before. Dad and 2 other people were the only ones left in the airplane. Dad had it turned around. Dad had it headed back to England. they crossed the coastline and got hit again. He was only 13,000 feet, so that was low for a bomber. He was the only one out there. They had plenty of target practice. So this time they hit the right wing, it caught on fire, and Dad said, well, there wasn't any more decisions to make. He set the autopilot, him and a navigator and bombardier jumped into the North Sea. The North Sea was 45 degrees at the time. This is August.
Wow.
So they were always told they had 1 hour of survival in that water and they would die of exposure. He said, well, I was trying to rip my coat off, pull the ripcord, and jump all at the same time. He got his coat off. He got his parachute. And he said, it was so silent. But he said, I twisted around in the chute, tried to see where my airplane was, and it was still flying. And my brother actually tried to find it. You know how you Google things and say, where did the crashed airplanes in World War II? There's a chance it could have made it close to the coast of England before it went into the water. It was a chance. Okay? So we'll never know. I'm not going to go find it. Okay? So, as it goes, that we were told that a B-17 would blow up within 5 to 15 seconds after the wing catches on fire, so I wasn't going to wait around and time it. Everything was in slow motion from now on. Once I hit the water, I started praying and praying hard. I noticed the other two chutes behind me, one way below and one above me and back. I think we were 15 to 20 miles out. Wasn't sure. It was 12:55 because I looked at my watch. We dropped my flying boots because I knew they would catch water. You remember those big heavy ones? He got those off. And then once he was in the water, and we'll get back to that, he lost his shoes too. And that came to bug him about 8 months later. He said, we had a whistle. And I don't know why I blew it, but I just blew him a whistle. He was floating now. Dad was never much of a swimmer, but he was keeping himself out of the water enough to breathe. So here's page 3, but I'm not going to read all of it. A boat started coming toward him. Well, it wasn't going to be an American boat because they didn't get a hold of anybody. It was German fishermen that were out there fishing, and they picked all 3 of them up. They drug them up on the boat, gave them a blanket, gave them a shot of whiskey, and said, well, one of them spoke English. Said, well, we've got to turn you in. We have to turn you in. The guy was a World War II, World War I veteran that had been taken care of by the British very humanely. So because when they told him that they'd probably, you know, if anybody German caught you, you're done. You're an airman. They don't like airmen. They don't like bombs dropped on them. They didn't. They treated him real nice. They took him in. Of course, they docked the boat, and the German army was there waiting for him. As he went through prison camp, there's all kinds of stories. I'm not going to go all tonight. I know I've been showing some slides, but this is his paperwork from Stalag Loop 3 when he was taken prisoner. He was in solitary confinement for 3 days as an officer. He was beat up. He had, if I understand this right, he had 2 pieces of bread in 3 days. No, Dad just, okay, we're going to make this, we're going to make this, we're going to make this. He did a lot of praying again. Okay? Dad was faithful all the way through, and I'll tell you at the end here how much. But that's his paperwork. Stalag Loop 3. This is the compound that Dad was in, the north one. If I'm in your way, just yell at me. Dad was the north compound, right in the middle. Okay? And I don't know how you pronounce that in German, but that was the name of the town that they went to. There was maybe 2,000. Another thing that somebody knows, please tell me. We think there's about 2,000 in this camp. Does anybody know anything history about numbers in this? So that's got me curious now. I'm going to try to find out how many men were actually there. It was about half American and the other half were RAF, Royal Air Force pilots. It was all Air Force people with a few Army, but they separated. Officers had to stay in one part, enlisted men over here, Army over here. They wouldn't put them together. They had a system where they bartered for food. If the Red Cross hadn't shown up and been able to go, we got some pictures of Red Cross trucks probably, but this is what he drew out and got out of there with. there's distances between those buildings. And it was on scrap paper. And he held on to that. Well, none of us saw it for about 30 years. It was his desk. So, if you remember this being on the movie theaters, The Great Escape, good old Queen jumping the fence with his motorcycle, that's Solid Glue 3. Dad got there, and we got a B-24 pilot in here. Your dad. His dad was there at the same time. They got there about 2 weeks after 70 of them were shot for trying to escape. Dad got home with it. He's got the letters from the German army saying, and interpreted into English, translated into English, don't try to escape, you're going to get shot. It's stupid if you do that. You know, why would you want to get shot? You're done. So they got some real propaganda type letters they handed out to all the prisoners they got in there. And he knew that was the way it is. If you follow the rules, you got by. The Red Cross would come in with parcels. And at that time in 44, 45, the war wasn't over, but it was getting better. They cooked their own food from the parcels like this. You can see that. It was almost like sea rations, almost like LERP rations, but worse. Okay? They could get anything they wanted to eat, maybe. And so they had a barter system. Cigarettes were worth more than salt and sugar and oatmeal and things like that. So Dad didn't smoke? Woo! Dad ate. Now, I have to say that when Dad came home, Dad went over there at 160 pounds, he came back at 135. But he stayed alive, he was healthy enough to make the march that he's going to have to make here in a few months. The Red Cross trucks coming in. The Germans would allow those in. And they would come in once a month, and they would come in with the partials for the whole month. And then they were supposed to be divided up among the men, no matter who was there. You know what? They actually were civil about it. They got them divided, and they used this barter system to do the extra, right? So Dad found this guy named Stewart that was a cook. He said he could cook, how do you want to say it? Steak over wood that was burned 3 times before. You know, they used everything. And so he put his rice with his. He says, you know, I had a pretty good time. Again, pretty good time. Probably a fifth of what we eat today in one day. But they were doing okay. Go ahead. So he came home at, 135 pounds. But before he got home, in, April 29th, he was liberated. But before that, they moved him out of Stalag Luke 3 to Stalag Luke 7. And if any of you have seen the 10 series of Masters in the Air, and you know what? I was alerted to this by a gal named Ripley, a history professor in Portland, Oregon. Her uncle had met my dad at a POW convention. She found out this was being put together. This is actual diaries, and I swear Dad's in it, but it's not. I know I had to copyright it. I would have known it. But the fact is, there's things in here they said, darn, he did do that. The one thing that I really want to tell you about in the movie, in the last of it, when they're being liberated from Stalag Luke 7, is that a P-51 flies over, rolls over on its back, and they said, all hell broke loose. It says there was fire and everything. They heard 155s going off, all kinds of machine gun fire, tanks firing their 90 millimeters, and they were being liberated. In the book, in the movie, a P-51 flies over, rolls over, and they start shooting. And you think, whoa! Somebody had this accurate. But this is a whole bunch of B-24, B-17 pilots' logs, or their diaries, that put this movie together, and put this book together. On that march is when Dad, not having any shoes that fit him, you know, the old story, that's when it bit him. He got blisters on both feet, And they were moving in January of 45, the coldest winter Germany had ever seen. Moving, we think, 2,000 GIs and RF pilots on the road walking. The Germans are in trouble. They didn't have transportation. They walked them 50 miles in 3 days. The third day, Dad was left in a barn because he couldn't walk anymore. He writes in his diary, I'm going to be shot tomorrow probably. They're not going to pick us up. 4 of them left in the barn. They all couldn't walk. They were in real bad shape. They had diarrhea from trying to drink any water they could find or the snow they picked up on the road. That's all they had. They had no rations on that march. They show this, or they tell about this in the book, the same thing. The bad weather. Dad and those other 3 guys got picked up by a wagon pulled by a tractor. And Dad said all it was prayer. I don't count on luck. But those 4 were picked up, put on a wagon, and hauled to the train station, where they were all put on a train. Another 3 days, 60 people stuffed in a car that was made for cattle. And I don't know, all of you know what European trains look like, right? They're not near as long as the cars that we have here, but they were stuffing 60 guys in one. There was no latrine, there was no water, there was no heat. And they made sure the cars that were the fullest were next to the engines. Why? When the P-51s and the P-47s would come over, they would go after the train engines. So they knew if they were going after the train engines, they were going to get their own men. He made it. Okay? What else do you say? I'm standing here. But the fact is, he got through that march, he got through that Stalingrad 7, and he made it home. He married Mom. They had been dating before, and he tells in his diary about some of the letters, and he would, Mary Ellen, why are you so angry? Why are you so concerned? You know, and, like, I'm not in trouble. He got 1 letter while he was in prison camp for 9 months. But the rest of it, he was getting regular mail otherwise. And he got home. And the fact is that he made it work, as I said there in the very beginning. And he lived till he was 95 years and 154 days, right? Almost his 96th birthday. But on September 24th, 1945, he got out of the Army in Florida. That was their honeymoon, 3 days down there. He had decided that he wanted to go into the seed business with his dad, and so he was going to get out of the Army. So if I can find it, I thought I had it marked here. September 24th, 1945. Well, 30 months of active duty, 12 months overseas. That's my stretch in the service. Here I'm homebound, safe with a wife, a job, alive, in one piece, and maybe physically and mentally okay. Maybe I didn't accomplish all I wanted to in the Army. I'm sorry I couldn't have helped more. Okay, remember, he went over in June, May and June, was shot down in August. He just, come on, you know. But Dad would tell me that quite a bit. I wish I could have done more. Just checking out as a first pilot. Maybe getting promoted to captain while I was here. However, that didn't work that way. With prayer and perseverance, I made it through. And I know it'll crop up from time to time. And maybe in our lives, maybe our lives will be better for it. Tales will get bigger as age goes on. The future is ahead of me, and it's up to me to make the most of it. I learned a lot while I was here, and I will profit from it. I have written a rather complete story of my Army career that mere words cannot express the complete feelings a man goes through when he's in combat. And any veterans in here know that. I don't know how you describe it. I don't know how you can say that's the way it was. Because when they're coming your way, it's a whole lot different. And they're not wanting you to smile at them. It's just different. I appreciate your time this evening. If there's questions, I know I went over here.
No, great.
What about this?
So, this was one of his Brahmin runs. This is that square out, by the way. This is how they had the formation. So we wanted to, Denis wanted us to look at this. What's that say? That's my middle name. That food stamp was for me. Dad glued it to that picture. Now, I don't know why. But I guess I got some sugar someplace. Something's missing. Maybe I was good for some sugar. I don't know what it was. But so I couldn't have been. Does it have a date on it? I don't even know. I don't see a date. But I was born in August of '46, so I guess they were still writing there. But Dad was always my hero and always will be. And the fact that he's passed this on to the kids, and we're trying to maintain the farm. As he came home, he was still a flyer. Dad accumulated 6,616 hours in the air. My sister Zelda helped me do this, and we even got down to even this afternoon trying to find his logbook with B-17 time. He had 491 hours of B-17. He had 1,090 hours and had 170. That's the airplane I soloed in. The fact is 6,616 hours. Now, how many of you in here flew with him? Ever took a ride with him? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's at least 10 of you. You're 10 of 3,475 passengers. Now, Zelda helped me find that, and she went through 17 logbooks to do that. 3,475 passengers. This is up until 2010 when Dad's health was starting to deteriorate. He flew off our farm just before his 90th birthday. I saw him take off in his 150. He came back, and I didn't like his approach, you know, and I was getting kind of nervous about it. And then, oh, did he land yet? I literally ran down the taxiway. He's on the ground. Dad taxied that airplane back. We put it in the hangar, and he says, son, that one scared me. He never flew again. Dad knew when to quit. It was a sorry day, honestly, and he gave that airplane away to a charity that was training pilots for missionary work in Africa. So that's Dad's legacy, except for right there, if you can see that. His 90th birthday, Dad was given a privilege, and honestly, I don't remember who got all this arranged. Do you remember?
Well, I helped in some respects, and then my son took him.
Yeah, my nephew that's got the airplane up in Chicago now, this is our airplane. 1927 Tango. Remember when the tornado was? That's what Dad put on his airplane. 1927. Anyway, this is Dad, this is the B-17. So, his airplane and his airplane. And we love having that picture around. Okay. So try to finish this thing up. Dad did other things besides fly. Try to raise 5 kids with Mom. This is his arrowhead collection. All of this is within 3 miles of where Linda and I live right now. Dad found every one of these. Now, I'll bring this one though. We remodeled our house and found that in the foundation. Right there. In 2019. We know that buffalo were hunted on our farm. We have a nephew. No? Cousin? Cousin. Okay. One of those guys that's related. Works at the U of I, archaeologically does digs and tries to prove where Indians were and where Indians weren't. And he showed me all the documentation for this one right there. That's to hunt buffalo. That's with the Illini tribe. That's with ones that probably came out of Moline. They were hunting buffalo on our farm 1,500 years ago. He dated every one of those. And now I don't know how he does it, but he did. So kind of proud of that collection that's on our farm. And so I think the last slide, we're now in 170 years of one ownership, one family owning the farm where we live right now. The farm that my great-grandfather bought, was basically a piece of it was bought off by Syngenta. We own all the rest of it, and we're going to hang on to it. Okay? Any questions at all?
When he was liberated, did he go from that camp to England and then back home?
Okay, we've got to go through that. He had to stay there 6 days. They were liberated, free, but no place to go. They couldn't get them all out of there. 2,000 again, I think. 2,000 were having to be moved. They were trying to fly them out in C-47s, DC-3s. They're about 20, right? 18, 20? Is that right, guys? You know? I think that's about all you can get one of those. That's the old Ozark Airlines. 18 to 20. So they're trying to fly them out 20 at a time. He was there 6 days. After that, he roamed all over the place. He brought back gas caps, put them in his pocket from the planes that were out there in the field. They were crawling over German tanks. And they were, there was food. Well, is it good to eat? Probably not. But the fact was, they went all over the town, just went back and looked at the list to see who was going out tomorrow. But he stayed there 6 days. He was taken back to England, and then they were transferred into the mobile command, whatever you want to call it, to move home. And then he was assigned to a troop ship. Then he got on troop ship. They said they had to go out in the harbor and anchor because they didn't have enough guys on it. Had to go back in and fill it up, whatever that meant. You know, instead of 900, they put 1,200 on it. And then came back through Ellis Island. And then got his, in Ellis Island area, whatever they had to go through, they gave him a plane ticket. You need one to Chicago. You're an Illinois guy. So they get you to Chicago. And grandfather came up and picked him up. So you just go from hellish to everything going wrong to, They made it.
And that plane, did he actually go to pick it up himself at that factory? I bet you told me that once.
It was delivered from the factory by the WASP, by women pilots. And they put all of them in this winter base. They said there was about 100 of them sitting there, brand new. So 53 of them left with his flight. The next day there was another 53 that flew out of there. But it was brand new, but he didn't pick it up at the factory, he picked it up at the in Nebraska Air Base. So it's got a brand new airplane. Any of you flown a brand new airplane with a brand new engine? What are you supposed to do with it?
Run like crazy.
Yeah.
Go to the airport.
Pet it easy, fly over the airport, nice girl, be good to me, don't quit. They only had a 4,000-mile trip to make on brand new engines. They actually, they went back, their engineer on this flight was told that he had to crank them over every day. If they had to sit in weather, he had to go down and start them. Those big radial engines, if you let them sit, all the oil runs to the bottom. If you tried to start them without turning the prop, you'd blow the bottom jugs off. So you had to go back, it took 2 men in the wintertime, this is January, to pull them through, pull them through, pull them through. Then they would start them, and they'd run them for 5 minutes, shut them down. Every day, if they weren't flying. But if they didn't pull them through first, they'd blow the engine apart.
I'll be tired.
So, they held, 15 gallon? You got me? You guys on the radio? 50? A 50-gallon oil.
And heavy, 50 weight
Yeah,
oil.
50, yeah. And somebody was telling me, it was Denis, was telling me that in Newfoundland, they're still picking up the oil.
Oh.
They would get there, see they've got 25, they got 20 hours on those engines maybe, so they changed the oil. 50 gallon times 4 times 50. Think about that one. What, 2,000 gallons of oil? They got to change in one night and get them on the road.
That's a lot.
And I was thinking the other thing too, every mission, his 452nd burned 15 to 16,000 gallons of gas every mission. And they were set to fly every day. That was one of those air bases you saw up there. How did we get that much gas? Some days, how did we do this? How did we get that many bombs? How did we, anyway.
I've been told that they had 130 octane made in Aruba by Shell Oil Company.
In Aruba? They brought it from Aruba?
Made the difference because it would perform, they could fly higher and boost more and get more horsepower than lower octane fuel.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, 100 octane was really hot stuff then. Okay, not JP4 or JP8 or whatever you guys burned bomb, wasn't it? 4 or 8? 4. Yeah. Okay, any other questions, please? Okay, well, I thank you very much for your attention.
We want to thank Nelson especially for coming and sharing his dad's amazing story with us. Like I say, everybody knows the Thorp name. We all know a little bit about it, maybe, Ernest's story, but it's so nice to have it presented by someone who knows the whole story. So thank you very much for coming. We will be back here next Tuesday night. We have a panel of Vietnam veterans, including 4 pilots, who will be here to talk about their experience. Denis will be moderating the panel. And then we will have, Nelson will be here also because Nelson is a Vietnam veteran.
But I wasn't a pilot, so I'm going to tell him how.
Yeah, and Shorty also will join us. Shorty was also in Vietnam during that time. He'll be part of our panel too. We have books in the back if you need them, or we'll be back there to sign them if you need them. So thank you all again for coming. We so much appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.